everyone, my name is Amber, welcome back to my channel. This is my joint wrap up for August and September. So I didn't do an August wrap up because I had a really busy start of the month in September. I just didn't have time to get around to recording my thoughts on all the books that I read. I got married at the beginning of September and then we went back to work and then we went on our honeymoon. So there was no time at all to record any videos. So here we are doing a joint wrap up. August and September weren't the busiest reading months for me because, like I said, I had a lot to do. August was taken up with social plans and also prepping for the wedding, and then September, obviously I've already gone over that, so I had a lot to do. So I only read 6 books in August and 8 books in September. My average ratings were 3.42 and 3.63 respectively, and I think that's actually quite good for an average rating for me, so I'm not mad at that. Without further ado, let's just get into the books because I have quite a few to cover. First of all, I read Walk on Earth a Stranger by Ray Carson. This is the first book in the Gold Seer trilogy. I'm not going to be carrying on with this series. It's not a bad book by any means. I gave this 3 stars. It's a YA fantasy book about a teenage girl who can sort of sense gold in the earth, and it's a historical novel, so it's set during the gold rush when California is found to have a ton of gold and people start heading over there to try and start a new life for themselves, make some money. So everyone wants the main character to help them with her powers, but not everyone knows that she has them. She runs away from home because her evil uncle killed her parents, and she starts making her way over to California. I think they're originally in Virginia or one of the Carolinas or something. There's actually a map here, so I should know. Georgia. She starts off in Georgia and heads all the way over to California. I enjoyed the sort of like road tripping part of it, or like the traveling part, but that's about it. The fantasy didn't really come into it all that much, and I didn't really care about all of the relationships, and then the ending, it kind of ended the way I expected it to, and there wasn't really anything to keep me hooked. So this is a really good standalone book, I think, and I don't really feel the need to read the rest of the series. I then read The Hurricane Blonde, which I received from NetGalley. This one is a contemporary thriller book. This is about a woman who used to be a child star in Hollywood, and now she has sort of left the industry and she is doing bus tours around the Hollywood Hills to show people like famous spots and famous people's houses. A few years ago, her sister, who was an actress, was killed, and she takes people on the tour to her sister's old house where her sister's body was found, and then they find a body again in the same house in the pool, I think. So there's a whole mystery about what happens to this person, who this person is. I didn't love this one, so I only gave it 2 stars. I don't really remember much about it. I didn't like the main character. The ending I had predicted would happen right at the start of the book, so I didn't get on with this one, unfortunately. I read The Last Thing to Burn by Will Dean. I did actually really enjoy this one. I read this one in one sitting because I just wanted something to fly through. Sometimes you just want to read a book in one go, and so that's what I did. I think I miscounted and I think I actually read 7 books. Anyway, I gave this one 3.5 stars. This is about a woman who was told that she could move to the UK and she would have a really good life there, but she just has to work off her debt, I guess in secret, and she is held captive in her husband's house and she is basically working for him. She's doing manual labour in order to pay people back. Obviously it's a situation she's not going to easily get out of. Her husband is absolutely awful, and it's kind of just a story of her trying to escape, or working up to the point where she wants to try to escape, and I did really enjoy it. I thought it was a good book. It was very captivating. It's not the best book I've ever read, but still, it was good. I also read from NetGalley Just Another Missing Person. This is Gillian McAllister. It's her newest book. This one wasn't as thrilling as Wrong Place, Wrong Time. This one is about a police officer who, she's sort of a detective and she looks for missing people and sort of keeps their cases going and in the spotlight. And her daughter had an encounter of some sort. They have a secret they're trying to hide, and so when this other woman goes missing, the detective is then blackmailed into keeping secrets or misrepresenting the case, I guess. I gave this one 3.5 stars. It was good, but I feel like it only picked up sort of halfway through, and I feel like the beginning could have been a lot stronger. So it definitely wasn't as good as Wrong Place, Wrong Time, but it wasn't a bad book by any means. I really enjoyed it towards the end. It's just the first half of the book was really boring. I think it's going to put a lot of people off. And then I read Queen of Shadows, Empire of Storms, and Tower of Dawn. Queen of Shadows was a reread, and I read it in like 2 sittings or something, and then I decided to do a tandem hybrid read of Empire of Storms and Tower of Dawn once I found out that that was a thing, because I'd never read these ones before and I just knew, because I cannot stand tale that I wouldn't enjoy this book because it's really freaking long. I don't want to read a massive book about him. So I looked up the tandem read, hybrid read, whatever you want to call it, online, and it was such a good idea. So reading it alongside Empire of Storms, it's just so much more interesting, and there was so much more going on, and I got to spend time with the characters that I really enjoy before then going back to these chapters. Although every time I finished up the chapters on Empire of Storms, I was dreading going back to this one because I just didn't care. I really think that this book, Tower of Dawn, could have been a shorter novel. It did not need to be like 700 pages or however long it is. I feel like she could have wrapped up the story in like 300 pages and we still could have gotten the background that we needed in this to then carry on with the final book. So I will talk about all of these more in my Throne of Glass video that I need to edit and tidy up, because I did a full vlog, spoilery vlog, on the whole series. But I gave Queen of Shadows 5 stars. It's still my favourite in the series. It's absolutely fantastic. This is emotional. You can see by all of my tabs. I had a really good time reading it again. Honestly, I don't think Sarah J Maas can top this. This is so good. And then I gave Empire of Storms 4 stars, I think. And I do think it was actually a bit let down because I was reading it with Tower of Dawn. I think if I was to read it by itself, I would enjoy it even more. So 4.5 stars. I tabbed this one to death as well. And then I gave Tower of Dawn 3 stars, I think, because it was boring. Nothing interesting happened, and you can see from my tabs there's like 10 of them at most. I just wasn't invested. I didn't care. Again, I'm going to talk about this more in another video. But this book is set in what is basically a fantasy world inspired by the Middle East, and I feel like Sarah J Maas has kind of plucked the most generic ideas and themes that are in several other fantasy books that are inspired by the Middle East but do it better, and has plonked them into here. Yeah, I really wasn't a massive fan of this. I really enjoyed reading them in August, and this was like the majority of my page count. And that's a really nice segue into September, because in September I read Kingdom of Ash and I finally finished this series. I cannot believe this finally happened. I gave this one 4 stars, I think. There are still some tabs which you can't really see. I didn't love it as much as I loved the other books. So this is basically a war story. Aelin is separated from the main events from her kingdom for pretty much the entire book, and then the final sort of battle between various characters was a bit anticlimactic, and I don't think it was done really well, and I honestly thought more characters should have died. But I still really enjoyed it. I'm glad that I finally finished this series. It's probably one that I will revisit at some point in the future, so I'm glad that I know that now and that, yeah, it's finally done. I have been reading this series since Throne of Glass was an arc up on NetGalley. I can't believe I've been in the middle of this series for so long. I'm very glad that I have finally read it. Like I said, I have recorded and I just need to edit and upload a spoilery reading vlog for that series, so if you want to see that, stay tuned. It'll be up in the next few weeks, I think. I want to get my Halloween spooky reading out the way first, and then I can edit it because that's not really time sensitive. And then I read Murder in the Family. I buddy read this one with my friend Judith. We read it in less than 24 hours. We just saw some reels, I think, of it, or she did. We decided that it would be really fun to try and solve the murder, because that's the whole like marketing picture for this book. 20 years ago, a guy called Luke was found dead in a garden, and then 20 years later there's a TV show being made about it, which is, I think, produced by the son or his stepson, who was a child at the time. And it's all told in mixed media interview format in scripts, so you're sort of reading what happened episode by episode. I did find it very interesting. I do have to brag a little bit. I guessed or figured out the twist in the first hour or so of reading. Admittedly, I was kind of just firing out all of the different ideas that came to my head. I did kind of know that's where I was going to go, but my friend and I did have a ton of ideas for this one, and so nothing was really certain until the very end. I just knew that certain people were acting shady. I just didn't know why. So I did enjoy this one. I gave it 3.5 stars because it was a lot of fun to read. I read The Road Trip by Beth O'Leary. This is the last Beth O'Leary book that I had to read before her newest release, and I really enjoyed it. So this one isn't as devastating and heartbreaking as her previous books. It still does deal with some difficult and dark topics. It's not heartbreaking, and there's not like an awful twist that kind of pulls your heart out. So this one is about a woman who is on her way up to Scotland for a wedding. She's with her sister, and then she is crashed into, rear-ended by her ex-boyfriend and his ex-best friend, and so they decide to all travel together. And then you find out through flashbacks sort of the history of the main character and the boyfriend, and you see it from their points of view, and it is very interesting and it's very enjoyable. I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoy Beth O'Leary's writing, and I can't wait for her newest book, which is already out. I think it came out like last week, and I'm so excited to read it. I've reserved it from the library and I really hope it comes in soon, but at the moment it's still on order, so it's nowhere near ready for me to pick up yet. I also read Hellfinder by Paula Stokes. This is an author who I've read from before, but I think she is now self-publishing or indie publishing her books. I don't think she has been picked up by another publisher. She used to write sort of mystery thrillers, and now this is more of an action thriller with a bit of magical realism or fantasy horror thrown in. I didn't love this one. I gave it 3 stars because it was okay. So the main character and her grandma live together, they go travelling together. Her grandmother, goes looking for artifacts, I think, and solves mysteries and helps people out. And so the main character tags along because it's a YA book, and they head off to Iceland, where the grandmother is from, and they have to look for someone who is basically on the run. It was okay. I kind of skim read it towards the end, and then I didn't like the ending. But what I did really enjoy was revisiting Iceland through this book, because I went to Iceland last November. I have some really good memories from there, and I'd really love to go back. So I enjoyed it for the setting, and I read the author's note or acknowledgements, and she said that she had been to Iceland like 3 or 4 times now, and she loved it as well. So something about Iceland, everyone loves it once they go there. I also read Paradise 1. This is a sci-fi horror book. I gave this one 3.5 stars. This one is about an agent called Alexandra Petrova who kind of misbehaves in her agency, and she is sent to Paradise 1, where her mother has gone. It's a colony that they haven't really heard from in a while, so she is sent there along with a few other people to see what's going on, get in contact with the colonists, make sure everything is okay. And then once she gets there, bad things start to happen. This book wasn't really as horrific as I was expecting, and to be honest, the first like 150 pages were very different to what the back of the book was saying. So the first 150 pages, you're sort of building up to figuring out what exactly was going wrong with Paradise 1 and why it had all gone dark. Of course, you didn't know still after 150 pages, but 150 pages in, the main character was still expecting to be in contact with Paradise 1, but we already knew from the back it had gone dark and there was no one there. There was a lot of action in this one. I did read some reviews that said that the author was given this idea by the publisher. I don't know how true this is, it's just what I've read on Goodreads. He was told by the publisher to do this book, and so he took a lot of ideas from like editors and friends, other authors and stuff. And I am wondering if that has caused the beginning of the book to be a bit jumpy, because you're sort of jumping from one thing to another, and there was one action scene after another, and so many things were trying to fit in here, and it did become a bit repetitive, especially because this is nearly 700 pages, although it did read very quickly, to be honest. It does end on a major cliffhanger, and the kind of cliffhanger that kind of stops in the middle of a scene. I don't think this is a spoiler to tell you this, so I'm just going to read you the final sentence. You can skip ahead a little bit when I stop holding the book up. If you don't want to hear this, it's not a spoiler, it's just the final sentence, which gives absolutely nothing away. "Hello," he shouted. The tone of his voice was changing from a question to a scream. "To be continued." And that is it. And I was a bit shocked by this ending, to be honest. I was expecting to learn a bit more. I am going to recap this one for recaptains. I'm going to have to reread a couple of passages as well to really understand what's been going on. So yeah, I enjoyed this one, and it was what I wanted from space horror, but I think I need to read more sci-fi and space horror to kind of scratch the itch that I had been wanting to scratch with this. So yeah, it was an interesting book. Very weird. I read Foxglove. This is the sequel to Belladonna, which is a YA fantasy book. This is kind of gothic fantasy with a little bit of horror in there as well. Obviously, I can't talk about this sequel because it is a direct sequel and it would spoil Belladonna for you. But the first one is about a girl who death basically follows her everywhere, both figuratively and literally. And she is taken to a cousin's house, and she has to solve a murder and also figure out why her cousins are so sick. And then this book carries on with that, and there's a bit of a mystery here as well. It's not as much of a murder mystery as the first book, which is a little bit disappointing because I thought this was going to be. I mean, there was a murder that happened and a mystery to solve, but it just wasn't really the focus. I feel like this one switched much more to a romance with a little bit of world building as well, and history and background to some of the characters, rather than the mystery element. I feel like this was lacking some of those vibes, gothic vibes, but I still really enjoyed it, and I love this cover as well. It's stunning. So I will be reading the third book in the trilogy when it comes out next summer. That one's called Wisteria. I'm not really sure how that one's going to go at all. At least with the ending of Belladonna, you kind of know what to expect from this one, or you know who's going to show up. I don't really know what Wisteria could bring to the trilogy, so that's very interesting. I gave this one 3.5 stars. I read How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. I read this as part of a reading vlog, which is coming out in a couple of weeks' time, maybe a week. I don't know. I've still got one more book to read for it. This one is about a woman who has a sibling and their parents are killed, and so the two siblings are trying to sell the house, but the house is full of creepy dolls and creepy art. They think that the house may be haunted, and the estate agent is basically like, you can't sell this house while it's haunted because no one will buy it. It's potentially worth a lot of money, but you need to get rid of this haunting first. So they start looking into it. Stuff from their childhood comes out. It's also dealing with a lot of grief. It's split up into the 5 stages of grief, which you may be able to see here. It says denial. I did find it very creepy. It wasn't the kind of creepy that I was expecting. Instead of ghosts, well, there were ghosts, but instead of just ghosts, there were also puppets and dolls, and that's not really something that really creeps me out. It might be because I watched the Night of the Living Dummy 3 over and over again as a child, and they just don't really scare me anymore. So I was expecting like spirits and ghosts and stuff, but that isn't just what this was. I think the puppet element took away some of the creepiness for me, but there was a creepy child, and I don't deal with creepy children very well. That part was good. For a scary book, this was decent. I think I gave this one 3.5 stars as well. Yeah, 3.5. So not a terrible book, but not the best. I don't think this will really stick with me all that much. And then finally, I read The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. This is the first time I have ever read this, and I loved it. I also read this as part of a reading vlog that I need to read a couple more books for. So I'll get onto that, and then I'll do a full review for you in that video. But for now, this is the book that inspired the Netflix show, obviously, but it's very, very different. So this actually doesn't follow any siblings or a family like the Netflix TV show does, and so it was lacking that element. But I did really enjoy the character work that the author did, and I loved that she made the house its own character like it is in the show. So this is basically a story about a main character called Eleanor, who is invited to Hill House by Dr. Montague. He invites a couple of other people. There's Luke and Theo, which are names you may recognise if you have seen the show. But they're not siblings, they're unrelated, and they all turn up at this house, and they're meant to be spending the summer there, I think, but they actually they don't end up spending that long there because everything goes wrong. And Eleanor, or Nellie, is the one who's most affected by the house, and creepy things start to happen. There are a couple of really creepy scenes. You've still got the similar elements of the TV show in there, but the ending is where it kind of goes off the rails. But I did really enjoy it. I gave this one 4 stars. I thought it was brilliant and really atmospheric. My friend says it's boring. I disagree. I thought it was a really good book, and it's definitely one I would like to reread in the future, probably during another October spooky season, because it is a lot of fun to read. I would highly, highly recommend it. Those are all the books that I read in August and September. I think there were about 15, so I think my maths at the beginning was a little bit off, but overall I'm really pleased with the 2 reading months that I had. I'm hoping that I can do a few more dedicated review or vlog videos for some of these books, so stay tuned for those. October is already looking to be a really good month for reading, so I'm really excited about that. Let me know in the comments below what your favourite book of September was. Tell me if you think I should read it. Thank you for watching. I'll speak to you all in the next video. Bye.